And we're live. Thank you so much. This is great. So for those of you who are here in Facebook land, welcome. And for those of you who are live, thank you for being here, guys. This class is actually one that I've done for about 2 years. And I think it's extremely important. I've continuously am brought back to this thing, kicking and screaming, whenever I start getting kind of not thankful for things. And I think it's one of those things where there's such a heightened awareness about being thankful this time of year. That's why I do this class. What I want you to imagine is, what would the world look like if we did what we're going to do the next few days, the entire year? Now, maybe not eating to that level, but at least having the same attitude, right? Would that be pretty cool? Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to cover some really interesting research about what happens when actually people have an attitude of gratitude versus something that's more stinky, okay? So this is really a lot of fun. I think you'll actually see how to do it and then actually what you can expect in your lifetime too. So when I do talks, what I'm really thankful about is that people have encouraged me to do different talks. My daughter actually encouraged me to do this class. We did a little experiment, and I'll show you what we did at our house. And she's like, "Dad, you should do a class on that." I'm so thankful that she encouraged you to do this, and so it became actually a talk we do. The values we hope that you hold, I think most people do, is that you want a great life that's marked by appreciation. There's probably nothing more ugly than actually a person who is not appreciative, right? Everybody knows the spoiled child who gets something, it might be the coolest gift ever, and they're just like, whatever, and they destroy it in a period of time, as opposed to the kid who gets something very little and is extremely appreciative for it. It really comes down to what's happening in between their ears and, more importantly, here. Number two, truth. We live in a culture that's awash with ungratefulness, and it's always wanting more, and it feels almost entitled to things. Think about what we think about on Thanksgiving, which is what's really nice. It's a holiday that has nothing associated with it except family and food, which is kind of cool. Almost every other holiday has either excess drinking, excess food, excess presents, excess everything, right? Candy, flowers, all that stuff. This is just about getting together. Versus the next day, Black Friday, which is about get, right? Up at 3 a.m. to go beat everybody else down so I get the last one of a certain thing, like whether it be the next snowblower or whatever it may be. So there's that great contrast. And the hope is that gratitude can be learned to make life better. Wherever you are, 0 to 10. You might say I'm the most ungrateful person I've ever known, or I think I do pretty well. You can always improve, and so we're going to give you the what, the why, and the how behind that. Does that sound good? We'll get this done in about 25 minutes, okay? So when I say these words, guys, like Thanksgiving and thank you and gratefulness, what comes to mind and what do you feel about those things? Did anybody thought about that? If I told you that somebody's characterized by a person who's just thankful for everything they receive, what do you think about those people? Do you think good things? Yes. Have you noticed that as people go through life and maybe they finally have, like, they couldn't want for anything more, like they have all the clothes and food and house they could ever want, what's the one thing they always want to say? What can we get you for Christmas, Grandma? She says what? Usually it's, I don't need anything except getting you together with you guys, right? They're just starting to give stuff away sometimes, right? Okay? Some people actually have positive associations, but other people, sometimes getting together with people, especially family and friends, can bring up maybe some negative things. Like there's some history, right? There's the whole thing, we're not supposed to bring up religion or politics. And I just went to the funeral of a friend who, she was the mother of one of my best friends, and she was the most gracious host because no matter how rancorous things got about those two topics, she could always bring it back down to like the level, and we would have a great time. It was a lot of fun. We do the outward actions, like attending an event and saying or writing something, but our mind and hearts can be far removed. And sometimes that's a tough one. When somebody actually has gone through a tough time and now you're expected to put on the smile and have a great time, what if you can't, right? This is something you can fall back on to actually have that. And you actually learn to have integrity and be whole with desire, instruction, and practice. So we're going to talk about practicing the attitudes of gratitude in this whole talk here. So happiness versus joy. Thankfulness can be associated with both of those, but here's the thing. Happiness is usually where the person is thankful for the gift, right? So you receive something in life, good health, great food, a promotion, birth of a new child, okay? Those are good things, but it tends to be more temporary. It's more about pleasing yourself than the other person. It typically lacks significant depth. It does feel good. It's something that you chase. It's many times easier to achieve. It can hold you back from progress in other areas. Many times it's just a momentary thing that's just sort of with an event, and then of course there's the thing about what's next, and you wonder, did that really satisfy? It's more common, it's certainly a weaker thing, and it's easily described and based on circumstances, versus joy, which is where you're actually thankful for the giver. That could be the vertical dimension, like God. It could also be the person who's giving things to you on a human level. Contrasting with these things, whereas this is temporary, that's more constant. Joy is there no matter what the circumstances are. Over here, involving pleasing oneself, this is selflessness. In fact, sometimes I get the biggest kick out of giving something that I know is just the right gift for somebody who's going to receive something. That's a lot of fun for me. I have the gift of that, and I also like doing it. It can be very deeply spiritual. Joy tends to be much more meaningful, and it's something you choose to do. despite circumstances. I would tell you that there are people like Doug, Corey ten Boom, right? The family who actually housed Jews during the Holocaust. And then when they were finally found out for that and they were in concentration camps, she said she had to choose joy, despite the fact that her dad and sister both passed away in the concentration camps. It's a truly amazing story, and just her life was characterized by joy. It involves trials and hardships, and despite those things, and I think often that cultivates joy. It's very transformative. It can connect people to other people through lifestyle. It tends to be less common, of course, than happiness, and it's stronger, though. It's many times difficult to find in words. If you actually say, how do you have so much joy, or what is it like? It's like, I don't know. I just have this sense of like, things are going to be okay. God's provided for me, things like that. And lastly, it can still be present where difficulties exist, whereas this is much more likely to flee when things get tough. So, Gratefulology is actually a book that's called The Science and Research of Gratitude. It was a talk that was given. And so these authors, Dr. Blair Justice and Dr. Rita Justice, two psychologists in this area, they are all about advocating for gratitude as effect on physical health. They've done studies. Their papers actually pull up in what's called PubMed. Today I just went and looked into these things. And these articles that I pulled up, these are great research studies. The main point that they said is that gratitude has been linked to healthier and happier marriages. People who actually have gratitude are typically more likely to exercise. They are less depressed. They sleep better. They have healthier hearts. They actually have more life satisfaction, and they actually live longer too. Isn't that pretty cool? Like if you look at this list here of those 6 or 7 things, would that be a good life to have? Yeah, I think so for sure. What if changing how you see the world and changing how you actually respond to it, in terms of being more joyful about those things and having more gratitude, could produce that for you to be a nice thing to do. This quote says it all. What makes gratitude the magic ingredient is that it takes us outside of ourselves so that we can see how we are part of the larger, intricate network of sustaining relationships that are reciprocal. Now, sometimes in life, reciprocal means that there's give and take, okay? Sometimes we have people that come to our lives that actually it's all take from us. We have to give, and it seems to get much back. But if your life is characterized mostly by relationships where people are actually working for the betterment of both, it's a great thing. So this is, to me, I think this kind of sums it all up. Their work is characterized by this one statement. So let's take a look at this. Modern researchers on gratitude, Robert Emmons here, wrote this book called Gratitude Works. It's a 21-day program for creating emotional prosperity. He said, he teamed up with Michael Cole from the University of Miami. They did a significant research on how being thankful can make your life less miserable and actually make you more joyful. And so this is, again, if you do anything for a month, this is only 21 days, right? So here's what they did. They said they took people and put them in 3 different groups, and they were actually going to be, this year, they actually asked them to journal about things that fit their categories. So they said, Doug, we're going to have you write down 1 thing a week. So it's pretty infrequent, right? 5 things that you're grateful for. And then they say, Ron, we're going to have you write down 3 things that you're actually displeased about, that you don't like, you make you kind of cranky and ornery, right? And lastly, Jody, we're going to have you write down 3 things you are either pro or con on, just neutral or level on that stuff. And so they would consider the control group. And they actually kept track of their thoughts for 10 weeks. And at the end of the study, what they showed was that the people actually had the gratitude group, they felt better about their lives and more optimistic about the future by 25%, which that's significant. Anytime you see a test study that shows that much, that's different, right? But look at this. Their health and their exercise habits were better than the control neutral group. They had fewer symptoms of physical illness than both groups. They exercised 1.5 hours more than the displeased group, and they were more likely to have made progress towards important life goals like, advances in their careers or maybe further education. That's pretty cool. Just because you put down 1 time a week 5 things you were thankful for, right? It's like it sets up your expectations. If you think that life is basically going pretty well, that's a world you want to work in. If you're neutral, I think you're less likely to get out of your chair. If you think the world is basically a dangerous, unhappy place, how likely are you to actually move forward? Probably not, right? Look at this one here, gratitude experiment. They did this. They put 3 groups. Once again, a group that was going to be told to be keeping track of grateful things they're displeased about, and neutral control. And in this case, they wrote down something every day of the week. Okay, 7 times a week. 5 things that fit those categories, and they did it for 10 weeks. And then even greater gratitude in the gratitude group than the prior study. So if you did it every day, right? Would that make sense that if you did something 7 times a week versus once a week, you might flex that muscle and get a little bit stronger? Sure, makes sense to me. The bonus was participants in the gratitude condition also reported that they are offering others more emotional support or help with a personal problem, indicating the gratitude condition increased pro-social motivation, which means you're not just happier, but you're making other people's lives better too. Isn't that neat? To me, it just makes sense. If you are basically a person who said, I'm going to focus on things that are good, accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, the old song, right? Then probably I will actually be more likely to do things for myself and others that actually makes lives better. Experiment number 3, sleep and quality of life. Adults, they took people in this case who actually had adult onset neuromuscular disorders. This could be things like everything from like muscular dystrophy, okay? Really serious illnesses like that, or post-polio syndrome. And what they did is they had a control group that did nothing. They examined them, they tested them and said, okay, you're just gonna be part of the study, do nothing, and we're gonna test you at the end of it. The other group actually wrote down things that they felt they were blessed with every night before going to bed. And I think it's very important that in these things, the timing makes a difference. I'm gonna show you the exercise I do to start the day, but I think ending your day with blessings is very important too, because what you think about last tends to be what you tend to dream about, and it tends to be what tends to come out in your life as well too. For those people who actually wrote down gratitudes before they went to bed, they got more hours of sleep per night. They fell asleep faster. If you know anything about these groups who actually have these diseases, they have very restless sleep. They get jumpy, they get sore, and the worst ones are the people who actually have like quadriplegics, because quadriplegics can't move their bodies, and they feel everything you and I do. So if you and I feel uncomfortable in bed, we can do what? We can turn. Quadriplegics are stuck in there, hitting the buzzer, come help me, and the nurses come to make sure that the sheets are completely flat. Okay? They fell asleep faster, they were more refreshed upon awakening, they were more satisfied with life as a whole. They had more optimism regarding the week that's about to come up. They were more connected with others, and their spouses had more subjective well-being too. And that's pretty good, right? If your spouse is happy, you tend to celebrate that with them too. Isn't that cool? Just because they wrote down things they were happy for and blessed by before they went to bed at night. Number 4, looking at depression. Look at this study. Philip Watkins, Eastern University, studies the relationship between thankfulness and depression. He says there's an inverse relationship. The less thankful people are more depressed by 50%. This is a thing they call positive recall bias, which means that grateful people tend to favor towards a pleasant memory, whereas depressed people tend to have negative recall bias. So this is the person, when you ask them, first thing's like, hey, Doug, would you like to go see a Denver Broncos game? Doug says, oh man, that sounds great. Okay, because Doug's had some positive experiences watching the Denver Broncos. Now, if the Broncos were 0-15 this year, it's possible Doug might say, well, I think back to how the season opened, we haven't got any better. You know, or this is the person who just every idea you come up with is actually negative, right? Like, oh, I don't want to do that, and that always fails. And you're like, really? This is like Eeyore, okay, in Whoville, okay? Eeyore's got that negative bias. Gratitude may help potential for enjoyment and benevolence of things. Gratitude may provide coping skills for stress and loss, including appreciation for things that have previously been taken for granted. Like, this is a big deal. If you've ever had to go without some type of, even kind of a basic need, I see this in children. We actually have a family right now that we're caring for who, this child for basically about 1 year of his life had very little adult interaction that was healthy. And now that he's getting it, he's just like a sponge. He's taking it all in. Like, they just, you know, things we would take for granted, like just loving your kid, being kind, not yelling. He's getting it. Gratitude can direct one's focus towards the benefits in life too. Like, what are things that I can work towards that would be things I'd like to achieve and actually have some return on that as well too. So, gratitude studies on heart health. This is pretty amazing. This guy at the University of Connecticut did a study at the College of Medicine there. And he said explanations patients give for their heart attack, why they think they had it, predict the future for their cardiac health, which means if you actually ask a person in the ER, once they're stable, what do you think caused this heart attack? If they said it's something outside of them, like, here's the common thing you'll hear, that person makes my blood pressure go up. They make me angry. Well, who are they giving control to? Everybody except themselves. Ultimately, it's our emotional health, right? You let people make you angry. Now, I'm not saying that people can't provoke you, but if you actually adopt the mindset of nothing's going to rattle me here, I'm going to be grateful for what I have, and I don't thankfully not even like that person who's doing this stuff. Those people actually blamed other people for their heart attack were more likely to have a second heart attack within 8 years. But those who saw benefits from having a heart attack, they appreciate life. Like, if you survive something that major like that, that's a big deal, right? If you're talking to somebody who has a second lease on life, they say, right? They went into the hospital clutching their chest, there's pain on their arm, maybe their heart stopped. They restarted them. They said, you've got blockages or 99%, we're going to open those up. They do that. Those people who are saying, you know what, I was actually eating myself or not exercising myself into my grave, I've changed things now, they actually had a reduced risk of having a second heart attack in the next coming 8 years. Does that make sense? That putting it on other people makes you reactive and more likely to be sick. Those who actually saw benefits were more proactive and had less of a risk. And again, it's how you interpret it. Is it everybody else's fault or something you learn from? Okay? Artery blockage and heart transplants, some of the toughest situations. When they looked at 3,000 people who actually had blockages in their coronary arteries, the patients who actually had the worst blockage had the worst social isolation, meaning they were by themselves a lot, lonely, less likely to count their blessings, and it resulted in being sick. Now, when they followed these patients who actually had their heart transplants, they said that faith practices like thankfulness and appreciation led to greater compliance and fewer complications with dietary changes and medications. And at a 1-year follow-up, their perception of well-being was much higher. Does that make sense? Right? If you actually think, hey, I'm thankful for these care providers who are going to tell me how to not have this happen again, and you actually follow their directions, you might actually be healthier. Does that make sense? Right? It's just like, it's almost like common sense. But in this day and age of science where you have to have the empirical evidence, and you do now have it. Okay? Being a grateful person can actually make you less likely to get sick, return to being sick, and actually get better. Okay? Gratitude studies on marriage and longevity. So what they did is, in this study, they had people come in and sit down with a counselor, and they were actually watching. I think this is actually where they watch through the one-way glass, so you can't see them, they're watching you, there's grad students. They watch for positive or negative expressions as the couples interacted. So here's a couple sitting in therapy, and they're watching to see how they interact with each other. Within 3 minutes, they could predict with a 90% accuracy who's going to make it. If the ratio of positive expressions to negative ones was actually 5 to 1 or greater, that marriage is very likely to make it. If, on the other hand, it was less than 5 to 1, it could even be 4 to 1 or 3 to 1, there was a much higher risk of actually having that marriage not making it. Does that surprise you? Right? Once again, if people are largely expecting we're going to get something out of this to actually save our marriage or make it better, that's good. Longevity, the Mayo Clinic, one of the premier institutions in our country. When they gave people a score to check how optimistic they were, those tests that were taken 30 years before, when they followed up with those people after 30 years, if you scored higher in the optimistic test, you were 50% less likely to die. Now that's a huge thing, mortality, right? Not just getting sick, but actually not being around. You're pushing up daisies, you're in the ground, cold, dead, buried. If you're more optimistic, you're 50% less likely to die. In the Dutch study, optimistic people were 55% less likely to die from all causes, and 1/4 less likely to die from heart disease. And in a nun study, which is interesting, they actually took a look at nuns, the more positive emotions they had in life of nuns, they were more likely to be alive 60 years later. And a lot of times you see this, that nuns in a very controlled environment where it's very loving and so forth like this, and just calm and peaceful, there's actually an instilled sense of gratitude. They have a lot of longevity. They live way past the normal expected life expectancy for people too. So here's the thing. How does gratitude make me healthy? Well, it is something called neuroplasticity. I won't get into all the details of this. But essentially the idea behind this is neuroplasticity. You guys are living in probably the most exciting time in the world as far as neurology goes, because what they're saying is if you can learn to fire it in new ways, you can rewire it in new ways. You should look at stroke victims and say, well, you've lost these nerves, they never come back, but they said, some of these people seem to get these functions back. How does that happen? They force the pathways to work. And so what they showed was when a person is focused on gratitude practices, one thing it does is it actually produces dopamine, which is the reward hormone, okay? And that's a good thing. Like when you actually score a high level on a video game, or you finish a project, you get your car all oil changed and clean and looking nice, or you have done laundry for the day, there's a reward mechanism that kicks in, and actually that's dopamine. Number 2 is that those people who are looking for blessings in life focus you on positive aspects of life and produce something called serotonin. Serotonin is the lovely one that comes after tryptophan in turkey. It gives you that sense of peace and ease, right? Sometimes it makes you even kind of sleepy. Well, there's part of your brain, which is called the anterior cingulate cortex, which is this part right here. And it has lots to do with actually things like planning and regulating your emotions. And actually, you're more likely to feel good and won't be proactive if you actually have serotonin at high levels. If you're looking for all the negative things in life, you're going to sit down and say, here's why I'm not doing anything because it's terrible. Lastly, it tends to increase neuron density and efficiency in certain parts of your brain that increases what's called your EI. Now, we all know what your IQ is, right? That's how smart you are, the facts you know, and things like this, things you can calculate in your brain. Well, emotional intelligence is, can you read the room? You know, there's some people who just seem to have no idea what's going on. There'd be somebody crying in the corner, and they'd be like, do you see that person hurting? They're like, oh, I guess I really hadn't noticed, or I wonder what's wrong, where somebody's going to go and just be with them. When you actually do these sort of things, the number of neurons that you have, there's more of them, and they get faster at teaching how to do things. So that's a great thing. That I think the people who I really enjoy being around can go into a room of complete strangers and make everybody feel like they've known them for 10 years, right? They just, as my wife says, it's like the art of making people feel comfortable, which is a great thing to watch. So again, here's something gratitude does for you. With higher emotional intelligence, it takes less effort to be grateful too. When you are actually in control of your own emotions and you're actually creating that positive environment, it makes it easier. So it tends to be a positive feedback loop. Gratefulness produces more of this, which produces more gratefulness, as is a positive upward spiral, which is very, very good. Can I learn to condition myself to be grateful? Yes, you can. UC Berkeley, which is certainly no Christian institution by any means, they have this thing called the Greater Good Science Center that promotes positive psychology. They were given $3 million to do grants and research on this area. And what they showed was, once again, if people have gratitude, they are more likely to have stronger immune function, less likely to get sick, less depression, more joy, optimism, happiness, better relationships, and actually less isolation and loneliness. So we said loneliness tends to produce like negativity. What they've shown is that actually having gratitude gets you out of your out of your house and gets you spending more time with other people. These researchers, so interesting, says there's something to this. You've got to force yourself to look on the bright side. It doesn't just happen. And I actually think some people have better personalities for this than others. I tend to be somewhat analytical about things sometimes, and I tend to break things down to find out what's wrong and let's try to fix it. Some people just walk into the situation and say, what's right about this? And I wish I had that. So I've had I'd say any positivity I have in this category, I've really had to work at. Allie Ward, Dr. Edwards says that the choice of gratitude doesn't come without effort, but you've got to put some effort. But each time that you make the effort, it does get easier because remember, we're all making these neural pathways more efficient. What you tend to think about tends to come about. The pathways that produce negativity or ungratefulness, or the ones that produce gratitude and positivity, you're making those pathways more firm and more wide and more fast, whichever way you choose to go. That's kind of scary, but it's also pretty empowering, isn't it? That even if you grew up in a pretty negative household and you actually have a personality that doesn't lend itself to that stuff, you can teach yourself new things. And I really respect those people who are going to work hard at it, okay? They were actually asked directly, how can you be grateful in tough times? You know, we are in certainly a state in the world right now where if you watch the news, it's going to be hard to find something you're grateful for. That's why they always have the little, happy note at the last thing, like so-and-so sold Girl Scout cookies and she made $1 million, whatever. That's all cool, but man, most things make the news are bad. They said gratitude is undensable joy. It can't be shaken. Times are good, celebrate. Times tough, find the opportunity to celebrate too. It's an attitude. It's not based on circumstances, okay? This is great. Even though things are garbagey, it's very important to look for things to be appreciative. Stay aware as you need to be as active in the community as you need to be, resist what you need to, but make the time to appreciate the good. This is like the doctor's orders. It'll make you a better fighter of wrong, which I think is pretty cool. So, 2 types of gratitude that we talk about. One is that there's relational and conditional. Relational is when you actually focus on the giver. So, if you're just thankful for the person who even thought of you, like they could give you the ugliest pair of socks, you'd be like, hey, thank you so much for thinking of me. If you think about the gift, which is conditional, that could mean that you're not going to be as happy. Like, hey, these socks don't fit, I don't like the color, whatever it is. But the relational part is actually, without question, far more important at making you have an attitude of gratitude, as they say. So, when I reflect on my life, guys, I want to give you some real life examples. The first time I wrote this talk, I was thinking about the things that I've been given recently. This actually, one of my favorite bands of all time is U2. My wife got me the 4 CD set of their most recent album, which is like an extra set. I appreciate that a lot. It's a great music. This is actually a picture my son had drawn me. Great fun. He told me this is actually his rendition, I believe, of a car or a truck. And this is actually a thing that my daughter wrote about. She's reasons that I love my dad. And that actually sits on my wall. It's in her. She's now 22. I still have it up there because I just think it's a heartfelt thing from a kid. It could be the worst handwriting ever. This paper's been beat up and so forth, but I just love it. Why do I like these things? For the gifts, they're nice. But what reminds me is the person behind the gift. And so here we are. This is my family. We're getting ready to go here and meet at it's in the Oceans portion of Disney. That's me with my wife, my son, and my daughter Carson. So we're having a lot of fun there. That's the people I want to spend time with. So the gifts are nice, like I said, and they ultimately remind me of what matters most, which is the people. Okay? So remember, what you practice becomes a habit. The process works either way. You look for the bad or the good. You dwell on the bad or the good. You look for more of those things the next day, and you repeat again the next day. You get to choose where you look, and it's your responsibility to choose. They say that a grave is a rut with both ends kicked in. Right? If you just keep digging away the same old way, you're going to end up somewhere. And in this case, you end up in a place you don't want to be, in the grave, right? So instead, get out of a rut and look for things you can do that are positive. This is really amazing. They actually give you 10 things here. I will not read all of them. But one way to do this is actually keep a gratitude journal. I really encourage you to do this. This is something that I do every day on my phone with a group of doctors that I train with. We start our day by asking the questions. The first thing is, it's called a gas card. We'll go through it. G is gratitude. It's everything that you're thankful for. And I literally have probably 3 to 5 things that I put on that list every time. And there's actually things that I think about that of what's happened most recently. But setting aside every time on a daily basis to recall the moments of gratitude associated with ordinary events. gives you the potential to interweave a sustainable life of gratefulness. Number 2, remember the bad too. To be grateful in your current state. It's helpful to remember how hard times that you once experienced. When you remember how difficult life used to be and how far you actually have come, you set yourself up in an explicit contrast in your mind, and it becomes fertile ground for becoming more grateful. Ask yourself 3 questions. Use the meditation technique, which is called Nightcan, which involves reflecting on 3 questions. What have I received from, and fill in the blank. Number 2, what have I given to? And lastly, what troubles and difficulties have I caused? And that'll make you think of things that you definitely make better choices. When you think about sometimes the grief you caused in people's lives, if you sit back and say, next time I will not react that way, I won't say those words, I won't, whatever it may be, that's a fantastic thing. Number 4, learn prayers of gratitude. There are actually psalms all over the place. If you go through the book of Psalms that David wrote and other people wrote that are just things that they're listing all the great things about life, okay, that they've been given. Prayers of gratitude are considered the most powerful form of prayer because through these prayers people recognize the ultimate source of all they're given. Number 5, come to your senses. This is one of the things that will slow you down like nothing else. If you just stop and go outside and say, what am I hearing? What am I smelling? You focus on one of those things. In fact, somebody I know who has been a big spiritual mentor of mine, he says every time he leaves his house, he just puts his hand on the tree and just thanks God for the tree and the shade he gets from that thing, which is pretty amazing. Seen through the lens of gratitude, the human body is not only a miraculous construction, but also a gift as well, too. The fact that we're ensouled bodies that can actually do things is pretty amazing. Number 6, use visual reminders. I'm a visual learner, so this one is very good for me. If I put something up that I'm thankful for, make sure it's always where I will see it every day, like say on the bathroom mirror, in my car, at my work desk, or my workstations. They serve as cues to trigger thoughts of gratitude. Visual reminders are often other people. So you notice when you go into a brand new office building, everybody has all their workstations. How long does it take for people to personalize those things? Like boom, right? All of a sudden you have your name on your desk, and people put up their pictures of their grandkids and their last trip to Bermuda, things like this. They personalize it to see those things every day. Make a vow to practice gratitude, okay? Researchers showed that making an oath to perform a behavior increases the likelihood that the action will be executed. So therefore, you write down your gratitude, and it could be something as simple as I vow to count my blessings each day. Watch your language. This is a good reminder, okay? Not just the unrepeatable 7 words you're not supposed to say on TV. But grateful attitude of people have a fortunate linguistic style that uses language of gifts, givers, blessings, blessed, fortune, fortunate, and abundance. Number 9, go through the motions. If you go through grateful emotions, the emotion of gratitude should be triggered. Grateful emotions include smiling, saying thank you, and writing letters of gratitude. And that's one thing we did as an office. It was a great exercise for us during the month of November. We thought of all the patients that we serve, and like, who on this list has done just such excellent work, either in our office, like you've worked so hard at being a good patient, or sometimes you hear about things like, hey, so-and-so got a raise, or so-and-so volunteered some time, or so-and-so did something that's just like, that is totally worth honoring. And so we'd all sign those cards. It was very fun. And lastly, attempt to get outside the box. If you want to make the most out of opportunities to flex your gratitude muscles, you must creatively look for new situations and circumstances in which to feel grateful. So don't get stuck in a rut. Look for new things to be thankful about too, okay? Here's some books I can recommend. There's that one I mentioned before, Thanks, How Practicing Gratitude Can Make You Happier. Gratitude Works, a 21-day program for creating emotional prosperity. This is a great one. This is actually an online challenge. If you go to thanks4, right, like thankyoufor.org, there's a 20-day challenge you can sign up for there. And then this is actually an interesting one that he put on here. This is for the people who are really techie. You can open your own secret private Twitter account and have it be locked and not tell anyone that you have it. Then, whenever you want to scroll on depressing stuff, just hop over to your secret private Twitter account, toss out a bunch of tweets listing what you're grateful for. No one has to know about it. Later, you can actually scroll through them for an instant mood boost and try to find a couple. That's kind of cool. I like that one, right? If you're not a paper to pen or pen to paper person, that's all good. Now, here's my practice. So this is the one I did a few years back. I should have done today's. I actually have it right here somewhere. So this is my list of things I was thankful for that day. So F is all my faith, family, and friends. Those always make the top of the list. That's something I'm thankful for. My doctor just would ask me, what is that for? That's what it is. I was thankful that I have this chance today to make a difference. I got caught up on my sleep. My wife's love, right here. My kiddos' faith in their life choices. The Christmas season, the YMCA where I get a chance to go and train. Getting caught up on my work. This final workshop I was going to do tonight. My team I work with, and then of course my coaching community. And we had a chance to serve a lot of new patients that week. My action is to do this card, which by doing this, it gets checked off. There's a thing we do before we see patients, which is called press. 3 daily promises to read, listen to, do something good, and polish up the workshop. And then lastly, S is for special acts of service. So gratitudes, actions, and then special acts of service. I came up with kind of my life's purpose when I step into any role. My things, I want to make sure that I love people with integrity. Now, does that mean that I love everything they do? No, right? But I can love the person no matter what they're doing, and I want to do it with integrity. Whatever the situation calls for, I want to make sure I do that. And that means both deep and wide, which means I start at home and then work into the situation where I have my people that I work most closely with here, my church community, and then start to spread that out, like to the people I'm here, my dear friends I've had for many years of my life. That's where we go. So that's what I do. I write down those gratitudes, those actions, the next most right things I need to get accomplished, and then lastly, the selfless acts of service, what I need to do out of my own abundance. So when you see the world as like, you start here and say, look at all these things I'm thankful for that I've been given, giving of yourself becomes very easy. You literally see yourself as being a conduit. Like, I just want to be an open vessel to transmit God's love to whomever I'm serving. And if you go into that attitude with lack, like listen to all things that I'm unhappy about, it's hard to give that away. In fact, most people don't want what you have to offer because you're so stinky at that point, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a card. We'll practice this for 1 minute.
They already have cards.
Great. So everybody at home, take your 3-5-5 card. I just want you to put down, on this card, I want you to put down G, draw a line, put A, draw a line, and have S.
Hold it up higher.
Yep, sorry. So G column, A column, and then S over here. I like to just have one thing per category. Now, we're doing this later in the day. You can do it any time of day you want, but I think starting your day is the best way to do it. Write down one thing that you're thankful for. Okay? Could be a spouse. Under G, that's right. G is for gratitudes. Okay? Then think about what action you want to take. Now, it's getting close to being late at night, bedtime here. Maybe you just say, I just need to make sure I let my dog out and brush my teeth. Or maybe you need to read 30 minutes of a positive book, a good book. Or maybe you need to turn off the TV and call to your friend who's hurting. I don't know what it is. Whatever gut. I would say trust your gut on this, guys. I think if the world has any purpose and order to it, the things that show up in these things, they get called to mind. They are very much, I think, God-directed, and you would do well to listen to those things. I had a chance to share this at a funeral just a couple weeks ago. I had this person who I knew, this is my dear friend's mother. Her last few years of life had been kind of hard physically, and sometimes when I was leaving the office, I would think of her, and I would at least try and call her. I didn't just say, oh, it's whatever, too late, or that's just a silly thing to think about. I would call her, and most times I would get a hold of her. We'd talk for a little bit. She'd kind of tell me about how her life is going. I'd say, is there anything I can do for you? Sometimes there was something I could do. She didn't like the food where she was staying, so I'd bring her Valentino's pizza sometimes. Okay? It was very fun. And then it's just amazing things. So I just really just be silent. Turn off the radio, turn off your podcast, just listen. And lastly, special acts of service. Think about something you could do still yet today that would actually bless somebody's life. Like out of your own abundance, what could you give somebody that would make their lives better? Why don't you write that down?
And it doesn't have to be money.
It does not have to cost anything. It doesn't have to cost anything. You could just be sharing the idea of doing a gas card. Maybe you find out a friend to say, hey, I don't know about this thing doing a gas card. Would you like to do this with me for an accountability thing for maybe like a week or so and see how it goes? Be kind of fun, right? Maybe you can actually write this up and actually share it at Thanksgiving dinner table. If you have the tradition of going around and sharing what you're thankful for, do that. You got a couple of days to think about it, right? So, here's a big one. So this is actually one of the hardest times where I had to learn how to learn gratitudes were. This is what's called an oncocytoma. Here's a kidney. This is a tumor. My wife doesn't like this, okay? So about 2 years ago, a little 2 years ago, the dear friend I just had lunch with and my wife and I were actually going to a play. I think we had gone out to eat maybe before. I can't remember. Yeah. And they said, you don't look good. And I said, well, I don't feel good. I feel like I'm getting COVID all over again, but it feels like it's like right here, all in the center. And they said, well, you should go get checked out. I said, tell you what, I'll make a deal with you guys. If I feel this bad or worse tomorrow, I will go get checked out. And I woke up and I did feel that bad and worse. So right away, my wife was trying to help me find substitutes because we had a whole day of patients coming in, or at least that afternoon. And I was not feeling well. And I went in and they said, yeah, your bladder's distended. And they had to do a CT of me. And they said, we found a mass in your kidney that's like, it's actually bigger than the kidney itself. And I said, wow. I wasn't expecting this news, right? And then all these things they wanted to do on an emergency basis, I said, can I at least have tonight to think about it? Went the next day to the specialist, the urologist, and they said, yep, it's a big deal. This is probably a malignant growth in your kidney. You fit the age and description of it. You're a male of a certain age. You probably have a malignant tooth, and it's going to have to come out. And all of a sudden, this stuff is like, it's like 2 days ago, I was here adjusting patients feeling sort of run down a little bit. Now you're telling me I'm going to have my kidney removed? It was a big deal. And so, all that being said, over the next 2 weeks, a lot of things fell into place for me. First of all, I had to, by the way, this is not my kidney. Okay, that's somebody else's, but I want to show you this is what I had news I had found out. And I told a friend, and I kept thinking, so I had been told I have to have my kidney removed. And I said, I wonder if I can save it, because I think God gave me 2 kidneys for a reason. Maybe we can get this thing partially removed, whatever it may be. And my friend, so here it is, there are people who cared about me a lot. My friend calls me back and says, hey, I coach baseball on a team where one of the kids that plays with my son, he actually is the guy I think you need to talk to. So basically what happened was, in one phone call to my friend, I skipped over the initial call to UNMC, the department, the nurse, and then finally maybe could talk to the doctor. I got his cell phone number. And I called him and said, hey buddy, I'm just calling you because my friend knows you. He says, you might be able to help me out here. If I have my surgery here, they're going to take my kidney. Can you help me save it? He says, yeah, we do something special here. They have a robotic surgery where they can go into this little device, and they go in, they try to get as much, they have to make sure they get a clean margin all the way around. If they take any diseased tissue with them, it's no good, because that means they left something behind on this side, on the healthy side. He says, if I can do that and they actually stop you bleeding and your kidney starts to come back online, we can probably help save you your kidney. I thought, well, that sounds pretty good to me. And so here I am within 1 week's time. I am actually getting ready to go to surgery. I actually told him, I said, I'm going to go use the bathroom one more time. I've never asked you this. What do you think the odds are of me saving my kidney? He says, I give out 50-50. So as I'm in the bathroom, I'm thinking to myself, okay, if it does come down to a coin flip, 50-50, I'm calling heads right now because I want those guys to put their heads together and try and save my kidney, right? And 4.5 hours later, I woke up, and first thing I said when I came to, I said, did you save my kidney? He said, yes, we did. And so for 4 days, I laid in the hospital, and I went home, and I still had about 8 weeks of recovery, because once you go through something like that, they've kind of opened you up a little bit, and your abdominal wall is not as strong as it should be. And so that they said, I actually asked them, can I go back to work? How soon? They said, well, maybe 2 to 4 weeks. What do you do for a living? I said, I'm a chiropractor. I said, oh, you can double that. I'm like, great, okay. So now I'm thinking, like, what can I do? I mean, I'm thankful that my life was saved. I'm thankful that my kidney's been saved, at least in part. So I actually am walking out here with 1.5 kidneys right now. But what can I do? Well, Brenda and my friends went into overdrive, tried to find doctors that cover even half of a shift for us here in the office. What I found out was, after a week of recovery, I could get out of bed, I could come into the office and at least meet with people. Like if they had an exam, I could actually say, hey, good news. Here's this, we've just found out you're progressing here well too. And so I could provide some continuity to the perspective of their care. Because when you fill in for a doctor and you see a person 1 or 2 times, it's like hard to get that, what's the story you came in with, where you headed here. I could help them stay on track that way. I had an incredible skillful team and helpful people helping me out there too. I figured out if I can't do some things, what can I do? And I could meet and inspire patients. I could work on files and films. And I gotta tell you, I needed a lot of rest at that point. I was probably sleeping 12 to 14 hours a day, but by the time I was awake, I could come do something. And I'm thankful I had 1.5 kidneys, and I actually am thankful that I'm stable at this point and actually back to my normal life. So that was a huge experience, and I just had to focus on what can I be thankful for. And every day I did a gratitude card, and every day I could come into the office and do something that made people's lives better and actually still heal up too. So
and it turned out to be benign.
It turned out to be benign. It's good news. I got a phone call July 3rd, and they said, we don't get to make this call very often. It's a 1 in 1,000 chance, but you have an oncocytoma. It's not the renal cell carcinoma. They sometimes can turn malignant, but yours does not. It's been tested, and so you don't need to have any follow-up, anything for those. I was like so thankful, right? So here's the thing. Another one, I had a chance now to pass this along. During this time, my daughter went down to a 7-month internship at Disney. And when your daughter goes away, especially your firstborn, you're kind of like, it's tough to let that go. You know, I was like, man, you're going to be by yourself for 7 months. But we said, here's where my friends live, because we used to live in Florida. You can always get in touch with them. And we actually left her with my wife's car to use for 7 months. Well, she called up and said, hey, there's this light that came on. There's this thing going on. I said, oh, boy. So I looked around, and we found a place that actually had a tire store there. And I said, you need to go to find this guy. His name is Jose. He's actually this great place there at Firestone. If you ever get down there, Highway 192 and Highway 27 where they meet, go to Firestone there because Jose will help you. And he said, oh yeah, he said, you're just tell your daughter to come in, we'll check her out and check the car out, see how it's doing, and just whatever. And so he did a great job. And so I was reminded how thankful I was for that. When we went down that next week, I actually asked that guy, I had gone to Walmart and bought 2 pumpkin pies and brought them in for the guys. I said, hey, I just want to say thanks. And they were like, nobody's ever done this for us. Thank you so much. You know, but I just so a chance to pass along, right? The people who take good care of you and your family, you do the same thing back. Just good from you. So here's my call to action for you guys tonight. I want you guys to write down 3 big takeaways. That's why you have that white piece of white paper. Think of 3 things that you learned tonight. And then what I would say is make an order of either. Sometimes it helps to think of the big one that if you do it, it will have such a massive impact. But maybe it's the one you need to do right away. If you need momentum, do something you can do really quick. Okay, what's the next most right thing to do? If it means I just need to write that thank you card, do it tonight. And then if it's going to be a happiness journal, you may have to go shopping tomorrow to get that journal, right? All those kind of things like that. Get any of these resources we have here. If you want to screenshot that, there's some great ones there, the books and so forth, the online resources and everything. Those are all really important things to do. And what I would say is that try to make this either all or none. Try just to be 1% better tomorrow with this thing. And if you get 1% better per day for a year, you're a different person, right? It's so slow, but it builds and builds and builds. And before the momentum of the year's time, you're now characterized by gratefulness and actually thankfulness, which is, I think, is a great way to live. It's certainly a great way to go there too, okay? And then actually, there's a great message here. If you go to it was so interesting that when that all happened, there's a church down in Orlando called Life Bridge, and they actually had a fantastic message on gratitude that was so great. It was actually given right at the time of Thanksgiving too. That's pretty well too. So, ever seen this picture before? Mm-hmm. Okay, this hung in my grandmother's kitchen. I love it. It's called, I think it's called Grace, is the name of it. And there's quite a story behind it too. But that's the way, guys, it's not the end, it's the beginning. This guy doesn't have a whole lot going for him. He's got his Bible, he's got some glasses, some clothing, bowl of soup and some bread today. He's actually thankful too. So you have a lot more than that, I guarantee you. I think everybody here I know pretty well. You guys have a lot more than this guy's got going for him. And so you should be thankful as well too. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm simply saying that that we can be. And no matter what our circumstances are. Guys, I am done. So thank you for being here. Okay?
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.